to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rotten about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And take that away.
You know, that's my take. What's yours?
Protonic reversal.
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact that we are all up in your face. It is time once again for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. That's right. Friday night edition. The Quarantimes, volume 14,000. Thanks for tuning in, folks. This is a, not last minute exactly, but this is a continuation episode for an early episode in December with my guest, Mr. Greg Saunier of Deerhoof. We managed to get up to, well, almost the 2010s. And I say almost the 2010s because we barely got into it. So we're going to look at the last 10 years plus of Deerhoof, which it's amazing that when you have a band that has done that much stuff, is that prolific, that is that awesome, that it follows their own compass, their own North Star, and has had a career of that magnitude, that you can have someone on for a third time and still not touch all the records, which I think is pretty fantastic, personally. If you ask me, I think that is a absolute feature, not a bug. I'm pleased to have him. He's a hell of a awesome guy, and pleased to be chatting with him. Thanks everybody for all the recent shout-outs for recent episodes. Let's just get to it. Let's talk to Mr. Greg Saunier. Here he is right frickin' now. Greg Saunier, how you doing, man?
How are you, Conan?
Good. So just since but it's so great to talk to you, man.
You too. Thanks for spreading it out over 3 unintentionally, just because Greggy's such a motor mouth over here.
Well, you say it as if I had some awesome grandmaster plan, but I appreciate that. Right. Thank you. But I just felt like it was disingenuous to leave it at the last time that we had so much to talk about, and I loved it, but it's like, oh yeah, and then some other stuff happened in the last 12 years. It's like, okay, well,
yeah, right.
We can probably do better than that. Come on. So,
like if you split our time into 3s the way we have, the one that we haven't gotten to yet is the longest one.
It is, and it's interesting because I think there's a focus for a lot of people on those, I don't know if you call it the mid-period records, but like your Apollo and like that era, that it's I don't know if time has just perceptions of time have changed or what, but you guys have, there's so much to cover. It would be disingenuous not to talk specifically about that. But before we dive into that, I do want to say, just like last time, we're in a very changed world from last time you were on the show.
That's true.
If you had anything to talk to about that, I mean, I don't know.
Any random summary?
Yeah, exactly. Can you summarize the last 3 hours?
I almost think of it like my friend Muindi has kind of introduced me to this word that I think is very meaningful to describe some of the calculations that are being made right now by powerful people, and that is necropolitics. you know, sort of the politics that in which you make decisions based on how many dead people you think you can get away with causing, you know, before you run into political trouble.
Oh man, yeah, like that.
You know,
The most rotten kind of fight math. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's that. So it's like, well, 2,000 in January, maybe we can get away with 1,400 in March. And that stuff about minimum wage, maybe we'll drop that. You know, like what can you get away with, basically? And it's kind of like you're looking at some spreadsheet or something. It's like, well, okay, we'll remove the Muslim ban on day one. Like, what is the fewest number of things that we can completely reverse on day one that will give us enough goodwill to last us another few months till we have to do something else, you know? Just that kind of like, it's hard when you have a mandate and you've been empowered theoretically, or in the narrative, you've been empowered by millions of voters and dramatic voter turnout in Georgia, etc. But in reality, you've been empowered by a few rich donors. And so that's who you, like, you'd love to please both, but it's kind of like the rich donors are number one.
Right.
And then hopefully you can do the millions of voters as number two, you know.
God, it's so rotten. It's so rotten.
Yeah, it feels, it's already feeling rotten is my summary, you know, and just only the obvious, but just that the Democrats now fully, you know, without blockage of any kind in the executive or legislative branches of our government, are still finding reasons to make excuses that Republicans are somehow holding them back, which obviously isn't true, but they're pretending that bipartisanship is somehow more important than survival or something, you know, which...
Yeah, and bipartisanship in a way that has this ideal that doesn't seem to exist outside of Aaron Sorkin penned fantasy, you know, where it's like, why is that bipartisanship? Like they very clearly have said, we don't want you to exist. Like, why are you trying to compromise with that?
We didn't want your votes counted.
Yeah.
You know, the base of your party, we think, is a sub race of humans. So how do you meet, you know, Benito Mussolini halfway? How do you meet Adolf Hitler halfway?
He makes the trains run on time, and, you know, as a train person, you know.
Right? Classic. I'm not aware that trains ran any more on time under.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, Amtrak is a pretty.
It's pretty
mediocre. I think our trains are anything to write home about, you know.
Yeah, that was the big. The only reason I bring that up is because that was the big Mussolini. Yeah, but he makes the.
Yeah, I know.
And I know you know, Greg. I'm talking for the listeners. Like, why is this dude talking about trains? Okay.
Why are we talking about trains? Because, you know, let me tell you something. If I could retire today and there was no pandemic, trains. Boy, do I love riding the train. Looking out the window, watch the world go by. Deerhoof almost took. We had a show in St. Petersburg, and then a week later in Beijing. And we're like, we've got to do it, guys. Trans-Siberian Railroad. We're going to do it.
Yeah.
The exact number of days.
But
it turns out the train from St. Petersburg to Beijing only left on Saturday and Tuesday or something, and it didn't work out. So we were really mad.
That would be pretty cool, though. And again, it's interesting that the stories of how, you know, high-speed rail and whatnot is totally doable and like a reality in these other countries, rather than, you know, profit opportunities that never actually come to pass.
I mean, it would even be a profit opportunity if you added up all of all of the effects that it would have. But the problem is, well, it's just the obvious. It would impact the car industry and the fossil fuel industry.
There's people making money the way things
important.
are. Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's you can never discount that, unfortunately.
Well, at some point we're going to have to, because global existence kind of depends on us finally, but taking them down a couple notches in terms of priority on like the way that we build our quote unquote economy.
Does
but right now those are pillars of our economy,
right? And treated as if they always were that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of, I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts about that, but I was curious as to what your thoughts on that is, right? Like that it's.
I think that fossil fuels did not become a huge thing, upon Europeans arriving on American shores, but it did, once the Industrial Revolution occurred, then that grew, and then once the the mid-20th century arrived, and some decision was made. Okay, we're going to turn this into a car country. We're going to turn this into a freeway country,
right.
And so, certainly from that point on, fossil fuel, was considered, became a make or break industry. So if that failed, our whole economy failed, and it just ended up being, not the greatest decision in hindsight, because fossil fuels are finite, first of all, and second of all, that once they start running out, then you start panicking and starting wars to obtain access to other reserves, of oil, which end up being, under the country of Iraq or whatever, and we end up starting wars. So, which ends up, costing in many other ways. It would be better to transition to basing the economy on things that are sustainable.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. Another unsustainable pillar of our economy, and maybe one that's even actually bigger than fossil fuels, is one that we all are very familiar with, which is called finance. So anytime there are loans, student loans, debts, penalties, fees, even the auto industry in America doesn't make money selling cars. They only make a profit in their finance department. So it's the we've got a payment plan, and the amount of interest and likely penalties involved in that payment plan when somebody first buys a car is what actually keeps the American auto industry alive. And, when I say that's not sustainable, I think I'm just saying the obvious. It creates a bubble. So you're basically betting, like it was in 2008, you're betting on people not being able to pay it back. You do predatory lending, basically, and you're hoping that they will default and owe enormous penalties, and then that's how you make your profit.
That's how you make your money. Yeah, exactly.
That's not just some a few mafia people hiding in shadow somewhere. That is literally the main pillar of the American economy: is fees, penalties, loans, interest, finance, and we see what happens. We see how government prioritizes that as soon as something goes wrong in the finance industry.
Sure.
They're the first in line to receive a bailout, and that's because they're simply the most important human beings in America, according to government. You could say that the finance industry is actually a wing of the government at this point, and
because
has been
inexorably linked. Yeah.
Yes, because their success is essential.
Yeah.
They underwrite almost every politician's campaigns, and frankly, they write most of our policy. because of the revolving door and the lobbying. It's the people employed in the finance industry are the ones writing the laws that end up getting passed by the Congress. And so, basically, it's a fusion. It's a fusion of the finance world and government. And I guess what I would say as far as 2021, now that Democrats are in power, and there's no reason, there's no obstruction from changing course, and you look at it and it's like, well, look who's still priority number one. And when you see that, you realize, okay, well, that's something that both of our two parties have in common, is that the finance industry are the most important human beings on the planet.
Yeah,
billionaires don't just have more money, bipartisan, exactly. They don't just have more money, they don't just have more power, but they have more value as human beings. They're better human beings, billionaires are. They are worth more in spiritual terms. Their life matters more than someone whose income is less. And that seems to be a bipartisan philosophy. So, it's like, I mean, it's sad to watch, not only because of how evil that is, but also because of how idiotic it is from an electoral point of view. Like, if Democrats, now's your chance, right?
Yeah,
if you want to make yourself
the
anti-Trump, if you want to make yourself be the saviors of the population, finally, now that you got the chance, cancel student loan debt, raise the minimum wage, pay the
Puerto Rico
$2,000
statehood, let's right some wrongs.
Yeah, exactly. DC statehood, Puerto Rico statehood, Guam statehood. Totally.
So it's interesting that we're, talking about the financial bailouts and things along those lines, because
2008,
where we left it, exactly. This is right when we were right where we left it last time, and that all was very much in the zeitgeist. There was Obama kind of came in and was like, hey, if we don't do this right now, like the entire Western world is going to collapse because it's built on a house of cards, basically.
Yep.
And that's enter Ed Rodriguez, Offend Maggie, which it's amazing that we barely got to even talk about Ed last time, because he stayed kind of in the firmly in the 2000s.
He just joined the band. We rarely get any offers to, or any requests for our music in advertisements, very rarely. But one that we got, I remember, soon after Ed joined, and it was 2008 or possibly 2009, as the finance and banking industry and insurance industries were trying to salvage their tarnished reputations in the eyes of the global population. They were trying to find hip music to use in their commercials. I don't remember what bank it was, Bank of America, TD Waterhouse, or one of these anyways was trying to, or maybe it was an insurance company, actually. I think maybe it was insurance, now that I think about it, because it was Lehman Brothers was the big they were the big master villain in 2008, and it wasn't, they went out of business, but
that was a name everybody knew. Suddenly everybody knew that name, exactly. Lehman Brothers.
They had to be the fall guy to give the appearance of due diligence.
All the bad guys have all been taken care of.
Yeah, bad guys all got big bonuses that year, right?
Go back to sleep, America.
Offend Maggie,
But they wanted to use a song, a Deerhoof song, one of these companies.
Exactly.
Sort of rehab their tarnished image. Exactly.
However, we needed also to rehab our unbelievably tarnished image, once no, we never had any tarnished image, but
thanks for clarifying. Thank you.
Not till this interview comes out.
Just so we're clear.
You're getting all the dirty I mean, it was amazing when Ed was living in his van, in Oakland for like a year, literally living in his van,
really?
going to the bathroom at the the YMCA, and he was playing in XBXRX, Bay Area at that time, a Bay Area band.
Yep.
He replaced Paul Kosturos as the bass player in the band. But the XBXRX did not pay enough bills for him to actually afford rent, so he was living in his van. And one day, Satomi and John and I, I think like a light bulb went off over all three of our heads at the same time. Or maybe it was that Ed was playing Flying Lutenbachers and stopped, and so he became available.
Sure.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
And John had been, I wouldn't say struggling, but because I mean, he's a virtuoso on the guitar, and but we were having him play, two guitar parts and one keyboard part, and sometimes a bass part all at once.
It's a lot to cover. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and we'd been old friends with Ed. I mean, John had known him since, probably 94, 95 in Minneapolis. And they were like two peas in a pod. I mean, they just have a way of musically communicating and understanding each other's even most bizarre and arcane and uncountable ideas. They always just seem to understand each other. And it was like uncanny rapport between these two nutcases, and so it was like once Ed became available, we were like, we got to ask him to join, and he was just like in a heartbeat, it was like, yeah. And I just remember John and Ed had another band. They had a couple other bands. One was called Gorge Trio.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
Started in Minneapolis. And the very first tour that Deerhoof ever did in Europe was opening for Gorge Trio. This was 2003. And actually, so Ed was on that tour. And we were all in the same large van for the whole tour. In February in Europe, whatever. I mean, at this point, everybody has experienced bad weather, at some point wherever they live. But, it was like, changing what language we were trying to speak, every day. It was before any kind of Google Maps or anything, before cell phones. We were getting lost every single day on this tour. I may have talked about it last time, but the funny thing is that Ed was on the tour, and because he was playing with Gorge Trio, so we became very close friends. When people are riding a roller coaster together,
right?
They bond, and so we were already totally bonded with Ed, and so it was just so easy. He'd start coming over to our house or something, and he'd bring his guitar. We'd just sit there and just everything made sense. And, anytime we'd start in on a song we were writing, he immediately, he just started making up his own part that just seemed to fit perfectly. And I don't know, it was like, it was really like magic.
Yeah. Well, and it seemed very natural from an outsider perspective, again, because, if nothing else, because they almost had like that shared brain from playing so long, like Gorge Trio and Colossamite and whatnot, that they knew how to complement each other and to contrast.
But at the same time, that does make it sound as though, and guys, I hope that you're not listening, but it sounds in a way like what you're saying is these two people they had one brain between them.
Not what I mean at all. No, at all. But just that they're I don't want to like a symbiosis. Symbiosis is kind of what I was thinking of, right?
Yeah.
And it was sort of like, oh yeah, cool, that's awesome. Like, and it allowed for like Offend Maggie is like very much cool, kind of a not that the other ones weren't, but kind of like cool guitar record. Like
I think because one of the funny things we did, this one was recorded at an actual recording studio, Tiny Telephone, the now defunct Tiny Telephone, and I don't remember why. Maybe Ian Pellicci maybe had free time. I don't remember why we were able to afford it. I think actually I do remember why. It was Third Eye Blind had booked Tiny Telephone for 3 months straight. And then a week before this 3 months straight was going to start, they canceled. They pulled out. So suddenly Tiny Telephone has a completely empty calendar.
Right.
And we're freaking out, what are we going to do? We're not going to be able to pay our rent. We've got 0 clients.
Yeah.
And so they were offering a big discount. And so we're like, well, we'll take our discount.
Yeah, of course.
And so we did, it's like Ed had maybe 2 amps and 2 speakers. John had maybe 3 amps and 2 speakers. Tiny Telephone probably had like 10 amps.
Yeah.
And so for every song we did, we basically just piled up every amp and every speaker that was available into a huge wall.
Nice.
and then just sort of like almost riff by riff, like which one sounds the best for this riff.
Sure.
Yeah, they would plug in. They would plug into that one, and usually we could get like 2 or 3 going at once with some like Y cables or something, or reamping, I forget. And it was like really fun. It was like a kind of weird math problem. We did it on the bass too, and where it'd be like, okay, we plugged Ed's guitar into this tiny little, single 8-inch speaker combo. Like a Supro or something.
Yeah.
But then we were also running it through Dave Brokima's Nerd amp through a big speaker, but then just that one was also going through this pedal, but the Supro wasn't going through the pedal, that had a,
cool.
some nice on it or something. Just whatever kind of guitar pedals or whatever. And so you get these like really kind of complicated sounds, rich, that it wasn't just coming from one amp, but was coming from, 3 different tones all mic'd differently and then blended together. The kind of stuff you can do when you're in a studio, that's basically like candy store, which we can only simulate with plugins, now that we're recording at home. But that was just like, that's one of the really, one of the fun memories of doing that. The hard memory for me is like having been so used to recording ourselves.
Right.
That now that we were on the clock and a red light comes on when it's time to record, I remember personally feeling like, wow, I am like blowing every take of every one of these songs. We'd like play and I'm like, I don't know, that didn't feel too good. And then Ian would like come in on the talkback, I thought it was pretty good. Why don't you guys come in for a playback,
Yeah.
And then we'd go back to the control room and listen. And I'm just like, I kind of sped up in this part, and my fill was sort of clunky in that part, and I just remember having to do so many takes of a bunch of the songs because I was feeling self-conscious, and I couldn't, or I just, whatever, for whatever reason, I was unable to relax. I felt like the like eyes were watching, or like fidelity was revealing every flaw in what I might have been playing, in the end, since we mixed it ourselves in the end, I was able to erase all fidelity from the recording, so then it
sorted that out. Well, and you did, there were some sort of, I don't want to diminish them by saying fun, but kind of fun things that happened around that record. Like I remember,
I got nothing against
I mean,
Yeah.
fun shouldn't be an insult. But you put up there's like sheet music for one of the songs.
Oh yeah, for Freshborn.
Yeah, that was so cool. That was so like, oh, how
You remember?
authentic.
So we put out a sheet music version of the song, not tabs, not for guitar, but just on a treble clef and a bass clef.
Yeah.
Not specifying instruments or anything, and put it out before the song came out, before the album came out. No one had heard our version, and then our Kill Rock Stars, the label that we were on at the time, and had been on for many years, created a website where people could send their versions, and it was like 42 versions or something of people recording this song that like varied, so wildly, just all over the place. We didn't say, is it a loud song or a quiet song, fast, slow, so the versions were just, it was just bananas, it was like, I think that we were wanting to do like an experiment of whether our songs, or at least that one song, actually this is what it was, Conan. I wrote most of that song. Satomi wrote all of the lyrics, which I think are very beautiful and very funny and very charming, about a newly born animal.
Yeah.
But I wrote the music, and it was after listening to the Sgt. Pepper's, and I hadn't heard it, in many years. I mean, obviously, it's not unusual for a musician to know every song on Sgt. Pepper's backwards and forwards, but for whatever reason, I had not heard it in a while, and I just pulled out my LP of it or whatever, like, man, I haven't heard this in a while. Why don't I? And I like really sat down with headphones and just like listened to it straight through, and after, I think maybe I was thinking about like when I'm 64, there's like that little transition before it goes back to maybe the third verse. There's like boom, 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 boo-doo-doo-doo.
Yeah.
And it was that boom, 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 boo-doo-doo-doo. I was thinking of that, and I was like boom, 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 boom. I was kind of writing in this boom, 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 boom. I was thinking about when I'm 64 and various other songs on on Sgt. Pepper's, and so then the experiment with the sheet music. The thing about these most Beatles songs, one of the reasons that they're so famous, perhaps, is that is not just that the recordings sound spectacular. It's not just that it sounds like Piper at the Gates of Dawn by Pink Floyd, recorded it at the same time in the same studio, or it's not just that it sounds like, I don't know, just that's actually a good example, because that also has a really psychedelic sound, and it's really wild to listen to and super fun and really clever, sophisticated songwriting and head-scratching lyrics and just everything about it,
Sure.
But can you cover? How easy is it to cover some of those songs on Piper at the Gates of Dawn, or to sing like Syd Barrett is incredibly difficult, because he's so bizarre, so idiosyncratic. His voice is so much about his voice. He's one of a kind. God threw away the mold. After, after but those Beatles songs, it's like they're very easy to cover. They're sort of like, that's what gives them this sheen of universality, is that they're so easy. Anybody with a guitar who knows a few chords can play a lot of the songs, a lot of the Beatles' most famous songs.
Right.
And it, have a very recognizable, pretty satisfying version. No drums, no bass, no horn section,
it still works as a song. Yeah.
Tapes or what, no backwards guitar solos. It's just a song that works on acoustic guitar. And so basically, I think we were trying to do an experiment like, well, maybe Fresh Formed is that good, like maybe our songs are like that too, that like anybody can cover them, and it doesn't matter how you cover them, it's still gonna it's like some indestructible, composition that's just gonna withstand any version and still sound like Fresh Born. I mean, I don't know if the experiment was a success. The versions were like, wildly different from each other, and that did the fun of it anyway.
I mean, as a listener, it was fascinating because so many people just took different approaches to it, and part of the reason, as you mentioned, is that there wasn't like almost an original version available to listen to yet, so people had nothing to compare it to.
Yeah, exactly.
And that kind of made it more exciting because people, some people took it in kind of crazier directions, and some people were more, it was more conventional, and it was. It just occurred to me that I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that before, and. Again, I'm the world, and of course the world that you and I both, exist in. It tends to be mostly bands who write their own songs and so on and so on. But like from a world of like someone that's like a composer, they would sit there and write their sheet music, and they wouldn't even necessarily know what it sounds like aloud. They had to hear it in their head almost.
Well, exactly, yeah.
And so to have
That's
like
correct.
this different types of interpretations, based with no context whatsoever, and with like modern technology or modern-ish technology. It was 2008, right? It was great. It was like kind of like one of the coolest ways to sort of get someone ready to hear a record I think I've ever heard of, because it was like, wow, I never would have even thought that would be possible. And like, were all the results amazing?
It was really fun.
Know. But like,
we've been lucky. I think that like Kill Rock Stars was very game, to try funny business. So that was really cool, and it turned out in the end that then Beck picked up on the idea, and then I think maybe was it Blur picked up on the idea. There in the maybe next 5 years or so there were they both. Yeah, but people putting out sheet music without putting out the recording, and then just hoping that people would do covers. Pretty fun.
Yeah, it's a cool idea, and it's credit where credit's due. Like that was the first time I saw it personally. So
Yeah.
Therefore, as an ostrich, it didn't exist before I saw it. So.
Right, exactly. That's right.
I kind of want to. So first of all, awesome record. The sequencing is broken up differently on the record, on the vinyl, than it is on the CD.
Well, there's even worse news that I'm sorry to report to you, Conan. That is that the reissued LP and the Bandcamp version, the once the LPs ran out and it was out of print, and then they decided to redo it.
Right.
And then actually it was Polyvinyl was the one who took over the repress of Offend Maggie. We changed the order again. I don't know why this is coming up. It's sort of shameful, but it's I don't know. Time passes. I mean, I hope it doesn't disrupt the listening experience for anyone too much, but it's like when you're first putting it out, you're trying to keep people's interest. You're trying to you want people who've never heard you to listen to it.
Right.
And I mean, it's not like that isn't true now, but once the record is like, okay, it was a thing, it didn't bomb, it wasn't a hated record, then you're kind of like, well, now that I'm not worrying about keeping people's attention, or I'm not worried about like trying to make a massive first impression with track one or whatever it is, it's kind of like maybe there's another way to think about it as more of a story, and so I think we just put it in a different order that felt a little more like a story, and so it was like I think it starts now with Don't Get Born, and then it's Fresh Born, so it's sort of like this idea of like
call and response almost,
someone in the womb.
Yeah.
Someone in the womb being told like, don't do it, you're making a big mistake, and then the next song's Fresh Born, so then they're just born, and then it goes through a whole story, not a literal story, but it kind of feels a bit like a story that, where things take various turns and, sadness enters the picture at some point and they're kind of ending with a sort of, I forget exactly what song we put last in the recent version, but so some of those songs are really to strike me as really sad. I mean, Jagged Fruit, really, really sad song.
Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so that may be hitting somewhere at the end, where you're kind of defeated, feeling. Right. Or a failed feeling, whatever.
Well, and
something like that.
It's you bring up an important point too. I mean, sequencing when you're talking about making a record, flow is often so important. But I think that the idea of a record's flow has been disrupted by,
obviously,
the modern construct of how people listen to music. And if you don't hook people in immediately, then forget it. It's over.
Right.
They're never going to listen to the rest of it. So that's
you'll advance to the next track in the playlist or whatever,
which services like Spotify absolutely make even more pronounced. Thank you.
All true.
Well, and it occurs to me that and as someone who very much likes listening to records and listening to the artist's intention of that record, that I think it's kind of a lost, not a lost art, but it's an art that doesn't get to. I always kind of wonder if it's exactly the way the artist wants it to be. These days I do anyway.
I mean, I don't even necessarily. I mean, even, Offend Maggie, I think about, okay, that record, what was the artist's intention? I mean, I can prove to you that I don't know what the artist's intention was because we made 3 different track orders. It took years for me to figure out, maybe this record is actually a story and I didn't see it at the time. We're scrambling to meet a deadline and, it's things look a little different, in hindsight, and maybe it actually makes more sense. So I'm not sure I believe in the artist's intention, but I do like, whatever. I mean, an album is a thing. It's a cool thing. It's something that I always loved. As a fan of music, I always loved albums, and then I make them. We obviously we make separated tracks too, so people can shuffle our music, or one of our songs can end up in a playlist or whatever, and that's totally fine. But it's fun to try and make the music work also as an album, as a piece, as a rounded experience. There's something satisfying about also looking at the bigger picture. For people, for those, it may be a shrinking amount, but for those people who have that kind of time, or patience or whatever to take it in as a whole record.
Yeah, and then there's the idea of also the songs living on after they're recorded, and maybe they don't tell you who they are immediately. You discover it later on, and that's okay too.
Exactly.
So then, Ed's in the fold. Ed's adding everything that Ed adds to the band, which is fantastic. And then, it's a couple years until you get Deerhoof versus Evil, the 10th record, right? I mean, I think it's
right.
Yeah, Jesus.
That's right. I couldn't remember the order. Deerhoof versus Evil. Yeah, I don't know what in the world we were trying to do on that. I think that maybe the biggest influence, we that one was not recorded at Tiny Telephone. That one was another one where we rented a rehearsal studio for a few months.
Yeah.
Just whatever, in one of those jam hotels, where it's band in the next room, whatever, and we would just go in, and we had maybe John's computer or something, and collected microphones and recorded everything in the practice space. And I think at the time we were making it, we knew. The first thing that happened was John knew he was going to be moving to Albuquerque, and it was because his partner was going to be got accepted to a PhD there, and so it's like, oh wow, massive change. We've been a Bay Area band since 1994. It's 2010, maybe it's 2009 while we're making it, but and yeah, I guess John's moving, and then Ed was like, well, yeah, my partner actually always liked Portland a little better. She moved down here to be with me, but if we're not staying together, I might move to Portland. And then so basically the band split up into different cities at that point, and we've never lived in the same city since 2010. So while we were making the album, we knew this was going to be the last chance that we had, to be living in the same location and like meeting at a regular practice base. Like, okay, we meet 3 times a week, whatever, that kind of stuff.
To write music.
And like everybody's got all their
gear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it was very dear, experience. But like what I think maybe the main influence on it was maybe one of the first things we did in that while we were renting that room did not end up on the album. It was for a compilation put out by Crammed Discs, this label from Brussels, Belgium, that they do the Congotronics series, and they putting out Konono #1 and various other bands, and they wanted to do a tribute compilation where people were doing remixes or covers or whatever of any of the songs from the Congotronic series. And so the first thing we did was actually a cover of a group called Kasai All Stars from Kinshasa in Congo, and the song is performed in the original mostly on thumb pianos, these distorted thumb pianos, kalimbas or whatever. And I just remember one of the first things that we did was just sitting there for hours. John plugged into his amp, trying to figure out how can he make his guitar sound like those thumb pianos on the original. And we just it was really fun. We were putting weird stuff to buzz in his strings, and he was using 12 string. He'd roll the tone back, but then find some way to get a whole bunch of treble, roll the tone off on his guitar so that you wouldn't hear the guitar pick kind of sound, but then you still wanted lots of treble in the distortion sound. So, it was just a million pedals and trying to figure out all this stuff. And it was really fun. So that was a song that ended up being called Travel Broadens the Mind, and it ended up on that compilation. And it was a cover. They the label ended up requesting a English translation of the original lyrics for our benefit so that we could sing it. And it's actually, I think maybe the only instance of 4-part harmony, vocal harmony in all of Deerhoof is on that cover. And me, Satomi, John, and Ed all sang in 4-part harmony. We were like a barbershop quartet, singing 4-part harmony on that cover. And it's just I still think that's one of my favorite songs that we ever recorded was that cover of that song. And then, I don't know. Then after that, it's we had that in our mind, and we started on a song called Super Duper Rescue Heads pretty soon after that. And, we ended up kind of using the same sound. I played a sort of similar drum beat on it, and John was still using his weird, imitation kalimba 12-string, guitar sound, with his, arpeggios and stuff. And I don't know. And then it just went from there, and I don't know. It was it was a good memory of recording that together.
And that was sort of the dawning of social media as we kind of currently know it around that time.
Oh
too.
yeah. That's true. I think I was starting to mess with our MySpace page. I was figuring out the ways that you could what every band had figured out how to hack their MySpace
Right,
page.
to
so that you
customize
could
it, make
links.
like dancing bears appear or whatever. Yeah. I have no idea what you're talking about, sir. Yeah.
We did do a thing. I remember when we were rolling out the record, in maybe the month or two before it actually came out, we premiered every single song on the record before it came out, each on a different music website.
I remember that.
Around the globe, and so and some of them were, it was like, Consequence of Sound. I can't remember, Stereogum. Some, it was one of the bigger ones, Pitchfork something, one of the famous ones. And then other ones were like total obscurities that had been kind to us in the past.
Yeah.
From Korea or from Taiwan or from New Zealand or something. And that was kind of a neat idea, actually. We definitely enjoyed that.
Well, and I like that when you did that, it wasn't just the big boys. It wasn't just the ones everyone knew. It was like, where is it premiering? Okay, what is this site all about? And
yeah, it was kind of a way to sort of to acknowledge and show gratitude to supporters.
To be part of an ecosystem, as much as anything else.
Well, if we must call it an ecosystem, sure. Yeah, okay. The internet.
So, and that's so around that time, too. And then it was ATP put it out in the UK too, right? If I remember correctly, they were.
Yep. Actually, it was ATP that first put us in contact with the artist who designed the cover art. We had done a double 7-inch that's kind of hard to find now. I think it was limited. A double 7-inch record on ATP Records. And I think one of the 4 sides actually was one of the covers of Freshborn that someone else had done that we ended up becoming friends with. But anyways, the person who designed the cover of this double 7-inch, we just thought, this is the coolest, we just love this artwork, and can we collaborate with him again? So we hired him to do the art with us on Deerhoof vs. Evil. And that was definitely a connection that wouldn't have been made without ATP. Around that time, we played, the people who ran ATP were Barry Hogan and Deborah Key Higgins, and they got married in Melbourne around that time, 2010 or so, and we played their wedding. We were their wedding band.
That's awesome.
With all their grandparents there and everything. It's a pretty wild experience.
Yeah, was that fun? Was it stressful? Like a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B?
So fun.
Yeah.
Kidding? I mean, so fun.
Yeah. That's not something every band can say, and especially a band that kind of is not like a band formed to do that.
Yeah.
So then, after Deerhoof v. Evil, if you will, we had Breakup Song, which came out I think about a year later, right? Something along those lines.
No idea.
That sounds about it. It was. I remember Obama's first. It was near the end of Obama's first term. Is how I remember it.
Okay. Yeah. Wow, you have an amazing memory for this.
Not for anything useful, though. That's the thing. Only this stuff. I mean, it's useful for this show. Don't get me wrong.
No. I mean, this is the important stuff. This is the good stuff.
Yeah. I'm the answer man for this kind of thing. So that's. So yeah, 11th record.
Breakup Song was like, at that point we were all split up. And that was part of,
living in different areas.
among the double meanings of Breakup Song was, we were now a band that was, kind of, recording remotely and writing remotely, which is obviously something that a lot of bands are experiencing this year. But that became the norm for us then, and we were, sending emails to each other all the time. And a lot of stuff, I remember, one thing I remember, like the very first track is called Breakup Songs. And I remember John pretty much sent like, a kind of done sounding version of the song by email at one point. And what it was like, like when we had been recording Deerhoof versus Evil, there's a lot of stuff like this on our albums where like we had been recording Deerhoof versus Evil and, he had the computer rolling, whatever, and it was recording, and I was like maybe testing drums or something, and I was just playing different drum beats, and he went back and found some of the drum beats that I had played that we never used, and that was one, and he just made up a guitar part to match the drum beat that I was playing, and that ended up being that song, the first song on that record. And of course, I didn't remember playing it or anything. And he sends this thing, he's like, it was like so heavy and it's so cool.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, this is awesome. And I remember I was living, I was subletting, a guy's apartment in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Gabe Andrusi's. What's that band that he was in? I'm embarrassing myself. They were kind of one of those disco punk bands from New York.
Yeah.
You're the go-to guy.
Yeah.
Who is it?
Fuck. Hold on. I know this. It's like it's on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of it. I'm gonna think of it like as I go to sleep tonight. Rapture. Thank you. I was gonna say I was gonna start singing "Out of the Races Onto the Tracks" because I love that EP. And I was like, God, that came up. That I thought about that band earlier this week even, but like it was just real missing in my mind that name was gone.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I actually was not at all familiar with their music. So it was a strange, it was a friend of a friend connection it was totally not a musical connection, which was why it was funny. But he was leaving on tour with the Rapture for like months around that time, and he needed somebody to sublet his apartment. So I was in his apartment. And of course, it's like on the third story, brownstone. I couldn't make noise in there, so how am I going to record drums? And so a lot of the drums on Breakup Song were, a recently purchased, Roland, like practice electronic kit.
Sure.
It didn't make.
Yeah, totally.
That's what I was using for almost all of it. And I'd go in there and just try to, you go into this Roland brain and try to tinker with the sounds. Anything I could think of to try and make it sound more realistic, but it was like it never did. And so, part of that I just, whatever, we just sort of embraced a slightly artificial drum sound on a lot of the songs on that record. Or I just, back to the stuff where I was like pasting in samples again, I think that would make it even less real, but, somehow, like if you pasted in the sample of a real snare drum going along with the Roland snare drum, then somehow it, you could fudge it a little bit, and it
just sounds like it's
but
got
I
a
just
weird
remember
effect on it or something.
Yeah. on my laptop, it ended up being really very computery. The so much of that record was happening in the computer.
Yeah.
We were emailing files. I remember a song called Bad Kids to the Front.
Right.
John had made a demo at one point on a guitar, that sounded like it could be like a normal song for a rock band to play. And I was like, yeah, I like the chord progression. It's really interesting, but something about it sounds kind of blah. And at this point, we were nearly done with the record, and we were maybe about to go on tour or something, and we were at Ed's house in Portland rehearsing and just maybe throwing on a few final overdubs on stuff. And I remember sitting there at one point telling John this about this song that he'd written. It didn't have a title at the time. I was mixing some of the Breakup Song stuff on my laptop on one couch, the one that I was sleeping on in Ed's living room. And John was on the next couch on his laptop. And about an hour or two passed where we're both sitting there working on headphones. And he's like, okay, listen to this. And it was Bad Kids to the Front. It was done. I mean, it didn't have the vocals on it yet. It didn't have a title. But like this, he had in that 2 hours, like the drums were there, all the all this stuff. I'm like, John, how in the world did you do this? Like, this is completely blowing my mind. You know, it sounded like, you know, it didn't exactly sound like a rock band playing, but I was like, well, I don't need to do any drums. I mean, this is perfect, you know, like this is fine. You know, and a lot of our songs are like that. It's not always me on drums. It's sometimes like that, or sort of programmed drums or other people playing the drums. And, you know, what was really funny was trying to learn that song later as a band. We do play it on the guitars. The guitar parts were so difficult. Anyway, so yeah, that was a funny thing. In the end, the four of us we were doing the final mix in shifts in Gabe Andrews' apartment, you know, and I would go for about 12 hours or something while, you know, on the laptop with everybody listening in speakers and stuff. And then, you know, it'd be like 3 a.m, and I'd be like, I can't do it anymore. I'm so tired. And then John would take the hot seat, you know, and I'd go like lie down. But of course, I couldn't sleep. He's still playing it through the speakers, and I would sort of yell over the bed. I'd be like, oh, I think that compression is too much on the vocal. Or, you know, not able to screen or anything. And just this basically a marathon, you know, of trying to like sequence it. And at 3 a.m, 4 a.m, 5 a.m, one of those, you know, maybe it lasted for 2 or 3 days. One of those nights, Satomi, who had moved to Greenpoint at that point, she was living in London for a while, but by the end of Breakup Song, she was living in New York. So she was walking back to her apartment to go to sleep at like 4 or 5 a.m. and saw this totally insane-looking garbage truck, you know, because that's the time of morning when they're going around. Business, and she was like, I got to snap this thing, and she took a picture of it, and that's what's the cover, you know. And
that's the cover. Nice.
In this sort of like sleep-deprived, you know, trippy mental state that we were in.
With all the lights and everything, yeah.
Totally. Started to imagine the whole record as this weird, like, party bus, or, you know, some weird, like, underground jukebox, you know, inside of some, like, moving, you know, flashy, you know, I don't know, just some imaginary image came into all of our minds, and it ended up changing how we mixed it. We were trying to make it sound like the whole record was coming out of some little box or something, and that it had this, you know, all electronic and kind of like dance quality to it or something. And so I don't know. Yeah, that's how that one sort of came together.
What country is it where they have the where they have the buses and they're all trying to outdo each other, and so some of them like play the music and they, you know, kind of make it like a party. Is it Colombia maybe? I'm trying to think of what it is.
I'm not sure. I feel like I've heard of that.
Yeah, I saw a thing on it like forever ago, like some news report, and I was like, "Oh, that's so cool!" But it's interesting that like the way it came together is because there was all these people competing for people's business for a ride.
Exactly. Yeah.
They had to get their attention somehow, and so some of them started playing music, and
Right.
and then they would like.
I mean, the idea of obviously custom car stuff is not limited just to that. Nor to garbage trucks or whatever. I mean, it's just it's a kind of, it's a way to, it's a non-mainstream way to kind of turn even if you've been relegated to the working class, that you can still, even without the stamp of approval of mainstream society, you're still engaging in art and decoration and sort of celebration, fun. I don't know. That whole idea really inspired us. Still does.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
We still think back to that. The name we came up with for that imaginary machine was the Jingletron, so that it plays little jingles.
Yeah, totally.
We were trying to write music that sounded like jingles. It's like commercials for nothing, It was like, the jingle is like the ultimate capitalist musical form, exactly what you just described with that competition is like, who can sell more? Well, it's whoever comes up with the catchier melody. But then you can, we were sort of imagining subverting the idea of the jingle to sell nothing, or maybe just sell Deerhoof, but
right.
But sell, to sell feelings, to sell. I mean, I think what we were trying to do was like at that time. I remember, certain. Maybe Bon Iver was starting to get big, or maybe it was Fleet Foxes, or kind of like really somber, melancholy. Yeah. Like, oh, I recorded this album, in a cabin in the woods after a really horrible breakup, and I think we kind of wanted to contribute something to that conversation about breakup music, in which it's like, well, actually, if you're going through a breakup, one thing that's often helpful is like actually some happy music, or some dance music where you channel those feelings into growth, or I don't know, just something positive, trying to not just wallow in
exactly.
pity, self-pity, whatever. So it was like
growth, not just not just wallowing like you're saying. It's So it's what about We Do Parties? That's a pretty cool tune on that record.
Yeah, well, that's the one where that one was definitely. I mean, I actually still have a video, I think, somewhere that maybe my friend took or something while I was recording the drums for that on that Roland, recording the drum beat, and it's like a video of me just in Gabe's kitchen. Just hitting these plastic pads. It doesn't make any sound. It's just like, it's like nothing. It doesn't sound anything like drums. Yeah. It's like the take, it's a video of the take of that drum beat. It was like pieced together. I think I was trying to write, the parts that I wrote, I intended it to sound like Judas Priest. It was trying to be like metal.
Oh, right.
I was like trying to write some like, up-tempo, whatever. And then John wrote some of the parts, and I don't know, we just kind of, put them all together. There was a lot of file sharing between me and John. And it'd be like, okay, I like this part, but can you send me the bass part? I'm going to put a different plug-in on the bass part, and I'll send it back to you, and then you mix that in. A lot of this kind of stuff. Way too much time in front of the computer, It's like our nervous systems are forever damaged, But yeah, We Do Parties. That's the song that has the line about thus spake the Jingletron, we thought it'd be funny.
You have that fun video where you guys are going around and doing like karaoke, and you got the glow sticks and all that. We did that in Japan. Yeah, after the record was done, and
And of course, our friend in Japan who made the video, I mean, like, he totally got it, the concept of like the blinking lights. And, there's this one neighborhood in Tokyo that's kind of an electronics city, like where if anytime you need electronics, you got to buy some headphones, or you got to buy a flashing, light for your like dance party, or or a TV set or whatever. There's this one neighborhood that where all the stores are, and they're all clustered there in this in that one part, and so we shot the
it's a good
shot
one.
video there.
It suits the song too, which is
There's one funny thing that video, a lot of it takes place in a karaoke box, and we needed something to listen to in the karaoke box.
Right. Yeah, of course.
As we're shooting it, we needed something to be on the screen and some music for us to be listening to, so that we could sing our song. We could mime the words to our song along with whatever the actual song that was coming out of the karaoke machine. Yeah. And we picked Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin. It's in the exact same tempo. And it's really funny. So I always think of that, like actually every time we played the song.
I can see it. Yeah, totally.
I'm playing the drum beat actually. I'm not really on the record, but when we play it live, I'm playing the drum beat from, the John Bonham drum beat from that Led Zeppelin song, which is, it sounds just like a regular rock beat, 2 and 4 on the snare, but Sean Lennon, who he and I had become friends and bandmates around that time when I was living in New York, he passed down to me that somebody had taught him that, like, no, that's not actually what's going on that drum beat. And Sean Lennon sat down at my drums and showed me, this is how you play it. And it's like you've got your right arm on the hi-hat, which is just like open and making a crashing sound through the whole thing.
Yeah.
So your left hand is on the snare drum, and your right foot is on the bass drum. And it's all three of them are going da 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 the entire song. Yeah. So none of them are not playing any eighth note. It's just which one accents more. So that's all it is. So all three limbs are just pounding jackhammer through the whole song, but then different limbs get a different, this one you play a little bit louder on the snare on the 2 and 4, or you hit the bass drum a little louder on some. Yeah, it's a really cool beat, and very physically tiring, but also fun to play. Yeah. So that might be my favorite song to play in any Deerhoof set. Because I love playing that John Bonham beat all the way through.
Well, it just goes to show how much that guy is kind of misunderstood as a drummer too, where it's sort of like it seems simple, but it's such a interesting part. Yeah, it's a musical part,
Right.
So then,
what came after that?
So that was.
What did we do after Breakup?
Yeah. So after that one is The Beautiful Island. That's
yes.
La Isla Bonita.
That one we recorded entirely. There was a guy called Nick Sylvester who used to write for Pitchfork and wrote Deerhoof reviews, and who had stopped becoming a music writer and became a full-time musician and producer and label owner. So it was like he'd switched to the other side.
Yeah.
And we met each other like at a farmer's market or something in Brooklyn. And I was like, I hadn't seen him in years, and we were catching up, and he was like, as a music journalist, I mean, he had really interesting things to say, like, oh, now that I see it from the band and the label and the producer's point of view, it's like I realize how hard it is, and how, like, a music journalist doesn't always fully appreciate the struggles involved to make something sound good, Yeah. And so he was like, we were talking, and he was like, I would really like to try and produce a Deerhoof record. So we made this whole plan, and that we were going to make a record with Nick Sylvester as our producer. And we were all looking really forward to it. We all convened at Ed's house again in Portland, where he has a basement, where we set up our instruments and we could rehearse in there. He had all the moving blankets and everything, tried to soundproof it. And we were basically writing and arranging the songs and learning how to play them in preparation for the recording session. But as often happens with this band, it's like, we were recording our rehearsals and then starting to get attached to the rehearsal version. Yeah, because
you like the way it sounds.
Some magic thing happened in the rough version. And of course, we're all blasting, in this tiny room. So there's no separation. It's nothing like a recording studio. Every microphone is bleeding into the other microphone, and the snare drum mic is mostly John's guitar. It's just a huge mess. But yet we're like, yeah, but this sounds pretty cool, So, we started, like, I remember it was the same thing. I was sitting on Ed's couch. There's something magic about this one couch of Ed's,
Yeah.
It's like, I remember the three of them were watching a movie about ramen on Ed's TV while I had the headphones on, and I was mixing some stuff that we had just recorded that day. And by the end of the movie, I was like, here, listen to this. And everybody's like, this actually sounds kind of good, maybe we should just keep this. And so then we had to tell Nick, like, sorry, we're canceling the whole plan. What we ended up doing was just recording vocals at his practice space in Williamsburg. And so Satomi and I, went over there and did that with him, which, of course, made us regret not doing the whole thing with him because he was so wonderful and had so many good ideas. And I don't know, it's like when everything is DIY, you only push yourselves or push each other in the habit ways. And he would push us. He asked us to do stuff that no one had ever asked us to do before. And I don't know. That was doing those vocals there at the end, once the mixes were basically done of the instruments, was like, I don't know, it was a really beautiful experience. And then Ed's partner Lainey came up with a lot of the song titles very close to the end, and she was the one who suggested La Isla Bonita as one of the song titles. We were desperate for titles at that point, and we all just thought that was the funniest thing. And the more we thought about it, we realized this is perfect. It just matches. Like, the record is like kind of describing a disillusioned, American like dystopia or something. Like everybody was so filled with hope when Obama came into office, and by this point, we were like, just felt really disappointed, really betrayed, and so many promises, maybe not even promises, but false hopes, where we realized, I don't mean we in the band, I mean, much of the population realized that they had been filling in the blanks with their own imagination. So if a person makes good speeches, but they're sufficiently vague, you could sort of like, well, I think he means this, and therefore I think this is going to happen.
Right.
And then you're like, well, I was dreaming, and so, yeah, the record is kind of like that, about the beautiful island. It's like that was meant to be, the United States, I guess. And yeah,
it's that's, and that concept that you're talking about of it's just so palpable, right? I just remember being like, even falling victim to it myself, even as someone that is kind of prides himself on critical thinking of like, oh no, I'm sure that they'll wise up and realize that they don't want to work in good faith on this, and it was like, oh well, maybe they won't, maybe they just like doing this stuff, maybe they like these drone strikes. Okay, that blows. But
the song that was maybe the most direct about that on the record was I don't remember. is it the last song? There's one on there called "Oh Bummer," and Satomi came up with the title. Yeah. And I actually never even asked her if she was using "Oh Bummer" as a pun on Obama, but the song is written. I sing it. She's the drummer on it. She plays drums on that song, and every time we played it live, it was the same thing. We'd switch, and I played bass and sang into her microphone. And I sang it from the point of view. I was trying to write a song from the point of view of Barack Obama talking to Michelle Obama. And so that's why it starts with Ma Belle. That's the first lyric in it.
Yeah, okay,
because I was thinking of that song, Michelle, the Beatles song. And so he's like addressing her and just basically apologizing for being a liar, and killing so many people. So it's like pretty dark song. Ed wrote all the music on that, and it was just like he'd written this music that was just so dark and haunting, and it was just like, we didn't know, and kind of huge, really big guitar, really dissonant, and it just sounded so beautiful and sad that I don't know. So that's just somehow how it came together.
Yeah, it's it's wild to think about that those were our problems at the time,
Right? Oh my God.
I mean, not to sound dire, I'm just saying that seemed like a pretty big deal at the time.
Yeah. I mean, sure.
So then, so then a couple years, and then we got The Magic. So that's
The Magic. Yeah.
2016.
One funny thing about The Magic was a totally blanket call across the music industry went out one day. Martin Scorsese is producing a new cable series called Vinyl that's supposed to be about a 70s rock band that runs into drug trouble and stuff like that. And we need a theme song for the show.
Yeah.
And it was just a wide net call to any musician or any band that wanted to try and sing. And it's like, and we need it by Monday. And this went out like Friday afternoon.
Right.
And, and all of us living in different cities, all receiving this email. And it's like, well, obviously Deerhoof's not going to manage to get together and write and record an entire song by Monday. But then secretly in my mind, I'm like, but I bet I could write one,
Right.
And I play the guitars. And so for the next 2 days, I sat down and I'm like, I'm going to nail this thing, and I'm going to write something like glam rock,
something appropriate for that show. Yeah, for what? Yeah, sure.
Exactly. And by the time Monday morning rolled around, I'm like so hot on my song. I'm like, I just wrote the best song ever, and I'm really into it. And I sent it to my bandmates. I'm like, guys, I actually went ahead and tried to write a song. And then as soon as I sent the email, I got an email back from John, and John's like, actually, I did too. And then we got one back from Ed, and he said, you know what, I did too. And so all three of us wrote theme songs for Vinyl.
Holy moly.
And of course, all of them rejected, for the show. But then they all ended up being on the record, and that's how we started the record.
That's awesome.
So my song was Plastic Thrills, and John's was Dispossessor, and Ed's was That Ain't No Life to Me. And, basically those songs are almost as originally recorded. Like Plastic Thrills is, I play all the guitars and Dispossessor, it's like John sings the whole song, and That Ain't No Life to Me, Ed sings it, and recorded all the drums and all the instruments and everything, and I don't know, that's kind of how that one started.
That's a pretty awesome beginning to a record. I mean,
it's really funny, yeah.
And then there's
we're listening a lot to and I don't remember why. I think I actually did. Okay, this is what happened, Conan. We were on tour in Europe, and our driver, when we drive in the U.S., John almost always drives, and the minivan, we rent a minivan, and it's totally silent. Nobody wants to hear any music.
Right.
And like Ed's usually sleeping in the back, with headphones on or something. So it's like the whole ride, every single day. I mean, weeks of tour, dead silent the whole day. We never turn the stereo on. But when we're in Europe, that we have to hire amps and drums. Yeah. And there's a friend of ours called Jakub from Czech Republic, who always drives us, and we rent his gear, and he always plays music in the car, and he just plays whatever he wants. And one day he played "Fear of a Black Planet" by Public Enemy, and we happened to all be awake at the time that it was happening. And I don't remember, but maybe we were like, I don't know, we were getting on each other's nerves. Maybe tour had been long at that point, and maybe we were feeling frustrated with, sorry, I'm about to sneeze, with the set list or how each other was playing, or, oh, you keep playing a wrong note in this one song, whatever it was that bands talk about. I don't even remember what it is anymore because it's been so long. But we all just I don't know, we just all sat up and listened when that album came on. We all remembered it, of course, and just, Welcome to the Terror Dome and Fight the Power and stuff. It was just really intense, emotional experience listening to this record. And so that was another thing that happened. We, in addition to thinking about doing this sort of glam rock thing, we were also looking for, I think we were interested in what is it about Public Enemy in that era and the Bomb Squad and the production, what is it, the Shockley brothers or whatever, that what made it sound so hard, like the snare drum was just the most obnoxious, just right. Everything so kind of rough and kind of lo-fi and but just sounded so gritty and just gave it this, I don't know, this very earnest or authentic kind of feeling, or also a historical feeling, because it's all created from, not all, but there's so much, it's so rich in samples, Yeah. So the drum sounds are coming from, classic soul jazz records or funk records or whatever. And just the layering, the really dissonant, clashing layering. So it's they'd put this Bob Marley song at the same time as this Prince song and stuff, and they were in totally different keys, and just let it just clash with each other and be so and abrasive and aggro sounding. And so I think we were also thinking a lot about that record and that aesthetic when we were making. And there's a few songs, like Debut is definitely one where it's a kind of, it started off as a kind of tribute to that sound, or if not a tribute, at least an attempt to understand what in the world they were doing to try and get those I don't know, to sound like that. We ended up recording it, once we had kind of made some demos and, we'd done those vinyl songs. We ended up meeting this time in Albuquerque, where John lives, and he rented out this weird office space in this mostly abandoned office building on the edge of town. It's really weird. Got a really good deal on it. Borrowed a ton of microphones, and we just set up in this office. It was so weird. We were in there for 2 weeks in an office. There's a video on YouTube of the song Debut, and it's nothing but photos that Ed took on his camera from while we were recording there. So you can see us in that carpeted room, John's there at a desk.
Where the cubicles would be, yeah.
And we just recorded ourselves in there, and it was really, really fun. It was fun, so fun to be back together, playing together. I don't know. Where the Isla Bonita was recorded kind of by accident. We were just recording our rehearsals. This time we took some more care, to make it and let's get a really good, drum take, and then let's overdub the guitar and whatever. I mean, we just it was less of an accident. You know, we were more intentional about trying to get certain sounds and specific sounds. So maybe there's more variety on the record. I feel like that one is, I don't know, one of my favorite maybe Deerhoof records.
It's a good one, and
I haven't
what's funny
heard
is
it in a while, so I that might be a lie, you know, if I heard it again. Maybe I would say.
Well, I'm gonna listen to those songs now with that in mind, with that Martin Scorsese, which I think they went with a Sturgill Simpson song, if I remember correctly.
Wait, what's that?
For that Martin Scorsese show, the one.
Oh, really? I never heard what they finally did, nor did I ever see the show.
I watched about. This sounds terrible, but I watched about 10 minutes of it and was immediately bored. And I sound like such a jerk when I say that, but it wasn't for me. It's like,
not to me. I mean, what you're telling me is that, you know, at least the first 2 minutes of those 10 minutes could have been a lot more exciting had they used my song, you know.
I wanted it to be something it wasn't, is the best way that I can put it.
Exactly, yeah.
And maybe that's a problem with me, but it wasn't for me. Yeah, it wasn't for it.
What did we do after the Magic?
Well, before we talk about that,
you know, I mean, what we're skipping, of course, is like
there's a bunch of
the
stuff.
other 90% of Deerhoof's existence, which was just us touring all the time. You know, it's like the albums were these little dots, you know, in the middle of a sea of nonstop touring, and it's pretty radical to me to think back to the fact that it's been over a year. I mean, our last show was in Montreal in January 2020, and that's the last time we were in the same room, you know. And we talk every week on Skype, and we're emailing constantly, texting all the time. We just finished a new record, you know, a week ago.
Well, that's fantastic.
And we're in constant contact and constantly working and caught up in each other's lives, but we have not been, I mean, like everybody. It's just very strange because of what a cold turkey thing it was, because, you know, it's like constant, you know. I mean, they really are my family. I've logged more hours with the three of them than I have with anybody, you know. And so it is strange. I was talking to somebody the other day. I met somebody's grandmother the other day, my friend's grandmother, and I was like, oh, so, you know, she lives here in Tucson too. I'm like, oh, where do you live? Oh, on this side of town. And how do you like your place? And she's like, well, you know, it's an apartment. It feels a little like a hotel. You know, you walk out the doors, you've got the carpets and stuff. And I'm like, let me tell you something. I miss being in hotels. You know, hotel
exactly.
feels like home to me. You know, It's been so long. You know, like I used to love. You know, that's just what I was so used to. You know, whatever. My little sob story.
No, but that's something that, you know, I talk to a lot of folks, and obviously it's going to come up, and it's a huge part of life for a lot of folks that's gone. This is like missing. Yeah. It's like missing like a limb that's gone. Just missing, yeah. And
I mean,
I think about it.
And at the merch table, I mean, just how much of my life is lived at the merch table. I mean, I'm missing that too. It's just like interacting with strangers, mostly strangers, you know.
Having discussions,
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, my bandmates always get mad at me when I take a shift at the merch table. The line always starts to...
Because you're talking.
Anybody listening to this podcast will obviously immediately agree that, you know, I have a tendency to, you know, start talking a lot, so then the line gets longer at the merch table. And then one of my bandmates has to come over and, like...
assist.
Take over, you know.
Right. That's
what did we do after the Magic?
That's fine. Well, before we talk about that, I want to mention I'm a lifetime Claymation fan, and I love the video.
Oh man, that video on the devil and his surrealistic, anarchistic retinue, or whatever it's called. That is just an amazing piece of work.
I love it so much.
I mean, I just, you know, we have done a lot of animated videos, or I shouldn't say that we did them. We had them done. And so, you know, we have rarely appeared in our own videos. And so there's always this moment, and it was intense with that one, where we received the finished product, not having the slightest idea what in the world they were doing in their laboratory for the last month or two, and then you receive it and just the shock, of seeing your song set to a movie that you had literally no expectations. And that one was just like so jaw-dropping. I mean, because animation as a form is so painstaking, so much work goes into it, and you can see the love, in every frame when it's stop motion, And this one was, it just seemed like they completely grasped the meaning of the song and the vibration of the music and everything, and the fast pace, and
I think all the way back to it's not exactly the same thing, but like when I first saw like Frosty the Snowman and being like, whoa, why does it look like that?
Exactly. Right.
It looks so cool. Why does that look like that? And I just didn't understand it. And then
exactly, that's the magic.
Yeah.
Jason and the Argonauts.
There you go. That's the magic. There you go. That is the magic.
Precisely.
So then, next up is Mountain Moves, which of course happens in the post 45 experience.
Yeah, I think a big part of the sound on that record was having been at a few marches in New York, and what drums sound like when they're bouncing off of tall buildings.
Cool.
And that was like a big part of the drum sound. I'm not sure it was necessarily successful, but I was, at least for the songs that I wrote for that record, I was very much thinking of trying to write drum beats that parade drummers would play, and write melodies that you could chant, and even the lyrics are usually like kind of meant to be slogans or something like that you would actually chant, in the middle of a march. And it was like imaginary protest music, but not protest record, but like the record was meant to suggest things that you could actually sing at the protest,
Yeah, totally.
And then somehow we hit on this idea of like doing duets and getting various friends, women singers to do duets with Satomi all over the record, and all of our different favorite singers, some of whom were higher profile than us, and some of whom were rather obscure. One of whom was very obscure at the time. She was a little known rapper called Awkwafina.
Exactly, which is weird. Yeah, it wasn't that long ago,
She came over to my house to record her rap for that song. And then we went out to dinner afterwards, and she was telling us the story. Yeah, I just filmed some movie. It's called Crazy Rich Asians. It's maybe going to be out like next year or something.
Right.
It was a long shoot, kind of grueling. I don't know, if it's going to be any good. And it's like, a year later, she was like a star, and then she was in Ocean's 8. Really funny.
Well, and
that was like the last obscure thing she did.
And
our song.
She was in that, they had those new Jumanji movies, which I like. I think they're very.
Oh,
fun.
I didn't see.
She has a great role in the second one of those, which is quite good because the conceit of it is that Danny DeVito. I'm going to waste time talking about the Jumanji movies, but I think it's interesting.
Let's have it.
They're in, these characters are in the video game, and these older characters get like the grandpa, and the grandpa's ex-business partner gets put into as well. So Awkwafina is Danny DeVito's character. So she does like her Danny DeVito. And it's fantastic, like, because she does a really good job of it, and it's like he's just kind of like, kind of like this guy over here, like. It's very good. I think those movies are very fun. They're not high art, you know what I mean?
DeVito saw Deerhoof once.
Oh, really?
He was side stage at Coachella. And he played. It was Chris Cohen's last show, 2007. And I think Chris Cohen's mom was a school teacher and taught Danny DeVito's son or something. And so
how cool.
told him he should go see Deerhoof at Coachella. Ridiculous. I mean,
awesome.
So we're like walking on stage, like about to go on, super nervous in this giant tent in front of zillions of people.
Yeah.
And like one of the biggest shows we'd ever played at that point. And I'm walking on stage, and there's Danny DeVito, and I'm like, I walk on stage to play, and I'm like, I have to walk back down. You know, I took the stage and then like left the stage because I had to go say hi.
Yeah, how are you not?
His most recent movie at the time was, is it Death to Smoochie? Which is Edward.
Yeah, with Edward and
Catherine Keener.
Yeah.
And it's about a musician, a children's musician, and I loved this movie, and I just had to tell him. Ed Norton was also actually, weirdly, a childhood friend of mine. We went to high school together. And so, you know, I had to tell him, like, oh, I know Ed Norton, and I really loved, you know, what you did with that movie. DeVito was the director. And, you know, I still think that's a really incredible movie.
Yeah, Robin Williams is in it, Catherine Keener. There's a lot of...
Exactly.
A lot of great people in it. I have not seen that in years, but I think I actually used to have the VHS of that. Years ago.
I want the VHS.
If I find it, I'll send it to you. But it's a good movie.
Well, did you send me a player as well?
I was going to say I don't own a VCR anymore. Exactly.
I don't even have a screen to play it through. If I did have a VCR,
I'll buy you one of those TVs that has the VCR attached to it. That's like in an RV and stuff like that.
That's what Greg needs. Yeah.
Just so you can watch Death to Smoochie on VHS.
It'd be worth it.
It would totally. You know what? Stranger things have happened. Let's put it that way.
I think that mountain moves, like one of the main memories that I have of mountain moves, I mean, I have a lot of memories, but like we ended up we chose a font for the album cover where, you know, we found some cool font that we thought looked cool. Where the M...
It kind of looks like mountains.
Actually, it wasn't the M. It was the W, and we turned the W upside down for the M, where it looks like two mountains.
Yeah.
And that if you sing the melody of that M, it's like... And so that's the melody of Mountain Moves. And I never asked Satomi, was that on purpose? Because it's absolutely a perfect... Like if you were to draw that melody, she's drawing that M of Mountain Moves, and you know there's two M's for the, you know, and that there's many instances of that shape happening in the lyrics and the artwork and the melodies and the whatever, you know. There's even a weird noise at the end of maybe it's at the end of Mountain Moves. I can't remember what song it is, but John. Some like academic website that his partner, you know, who was still doing her PhD, you know, back from Deerhoof versus Evil days, in linguistics, and some weird website where you could go to where it was a picture of a cross section of a human head, and it showed like the tongue. And like, you know, the glottal stop and like the Adam's apple going up and down. And you could like with the mouse, like change the pitch and change the vowel sounds and the
cool.
to try and make human voice sounds. It was the most ridiculous. And John sat there for like 3 hours. We were trying to get him. He was trying to make it say the word Mountain Moves, and he just couldn't do it. And so what we did, we just recorded like hours of him trying to do this, and whatever noise that at the end of this song is his, you know, the closest he ever came to making this website say Mountain Moves by dragging the mouse around.
That's kind of awesome, though. I mean, there's something to be said for. You know, a labor of love, which I can only be construed as such as that.
Everything we do, you know, obviously, it's just for the heck of it, you know. Totally. That's awesome. Dang, what album did we do after Mountain Moves?
So then that's Future Teenage Cave Artists which is
okay. So yeah, we're up to last year.
Yeah.
This one weirdly we had already recorded totally remotely. It was a weird like premonition of lockdown.
Oh yeah, because you recorded it before lockdown.
We only met to record one song, which was Zazit, and that one we recorded actually, not even at the same time, but at least we were all present. The rest of it was like the most random. I mean, anybody could be playing any instrument on any of those songs, and it was completely patched together. Like, I recorded a bunch of drum beats, and I was just trying to brainstorm, beats. It wasn't meant to be the final thing. So
yeah.
The easiest way that I could think of to record them quickly on my laptop was in a photo booth. Just make videos in photo booth. So I just sending
where
all
it
these
shows
videos
you like
of
the
myself
weird, like
just
the
playing
image
different drum beats.
where it looks like Andy
Yeah,
Warhol
and then-
pictures and stuff, like that photo booth you're talking about?
No, not that photo booth.
Oh,
just
okay.
the program on the laptop where you could shoot videos, and it's just the laptop microphone. So a lot of the drums on the record is just the laptop microphone. And I would email the beats. I would email an MP3. I'd email like 5 beats to my bandmates as MP3s.
Yeah.
They would record some guitar part over it, make an MP3 mix of that, send that back. Then I'd add something else, or it was like this, and it was like piled up. It was MP3s of MP3s of MP3s. I mean, the fidelity was so destroyed by that point, except that sometimes then somebody would do a really nice overdub, or I'd record a drum beat, with all the microphones set up or something.
Yeah.
So, I was just telling a friend yesterday, actually. We were playing this bass that was used a lot on Future Teenage Cave Artists, which is a bass that has rubber strings that we bought in the middle of a tour at one point. Yeah, rubber strings and piezo pickups. And it was really tiny, and Satomi thought and it was cheap at some used place. And it's like, oh, I should get it. It's so small. Like it might be easier to jump around on stage if I'm holding this than instead of some big thing. And she ended up using it for one show, and then I ended up with it because I didn't have a bass. So I had this really weird rubber string bass, and it has a battery. The piezo pickup requires power. And I was like, why does this thing sound so terrible when I hit the low note? I didn't realize it was because the battery had been in there for 2 years. The battery was dying. And so I was playing that through an amp, and then I would point the laptop at the amp. And so it was the laptop speaker recording this dying bass through an amp, through the laptop speaker. And so some of the bass on this stuff is it doesn't really sound like a bass. It just sounds like a weird noise in the background that you can barely hear. But sometimes it makes loud. That's kind of my memory of making that, is everything was in fragments, John would write a guitar part that went over one of these drum beats that I wrote, and then Ed would write a totally different guitar part that went over the same drum beat, and then they'd both send it to me, and I'd try to sort of piece together a song, and Satomi was writing stuff on some program on her phone, that wasn't even using any real drums or guitars, and we were trying to figure out ways to integrate that, So it really ended up being it's funny how the process of physically recording it and the audio of it and all of the mistakes that we made and the funny accidents that happened, ended up kind of creating the theme.
Yeah.
And the theme ended up being this kind of dystopic, not dystopic, but post-apocalyptic, everything is broken, archaeological, kind of things are just sort of broken pieces, and we're living in caves again. society is broken down, the power grid is unstable if there is one. It's hard to find food, it's hard to find water, and that image of like this blazing hot sun, that the earth was just scorched at this point, in the somewhat near future, particularly if we don't of course, it's like, it was like trying to imagine what that might feel like, and that ended up being kind of what the record was about.
Yeah, which is pretty heavy. So it's fascinating that was, because when a lot of times on the show, the actions of sort of remote-based creativity, like writing music from long perspectives, comes up, and that honestly that came up before pandemic, but obviously with pandemic being what it is, it's everybody's thinking.
But that's the weird thing, is it was released during the pandemic, or when the pandemic had just started.
Right.
So I think it officially came out in May, last year, but the first single maybe came out in February or March. And we were still like, wow, I wonder if we're going to be able to tour on this. And like by the time it came out, it's like, we're obviously not going to tour.
But it is crazy, because it was almost like day by day, like facts were different. I was sort of like, oh, well, okay, now, all right, is it, what's happening here? Like, it just, there was no agreed upon set of facts.
Yep.
And it's, I'm sorry, everybody knows that. They don't need me saying that, but it's...
Newsflash, But, no, I mean, it was weird. It was a pretty dark place to be, I think. Like, making the record, like... I feel like a lot of Deerhoof records, the process was not like that. That was one where I really felt... when it was done, that I was, and of course I didn't know, none of us knew what was about to arrive in the real world, but at least in the imaginary space that the music occupied, it was like, I'm happy to leave this place. I don't want to spend any more months. I've been going with this for months, kind of like in this imaginary future post-apocalyptic environment, and I'm sort of happy this record is done, because it just felt like a bit of a, you don't want to get into a position where you're, and this was very much, obviously, we all know, a feature of the Trump administration years, of where we almost, the doom scrolling, the almost the attachment to the darkness, and almost getting off on how evil it was, or how horrible the prognosis was, or having something to complain about on social media or whatever it was, like a very just a dark place that was very easy to fall into for everyone. I mean, mentally. I mean, obviously, people were falling into dark places in physically and in terms of basic survival. When you're talking about pandemics, or you're talking about trans rights being destroyed, or you're talking about more extraction of wealth from the working class up to the billionaire class, or if you're talking about racism or bigotry against Muslims, or all the features that were so pronounced in those years, it's like it was both a physically unsafe environment, but for many, but also just a mental. In 4 years straight, you just kind of like weirdly get used to it, and you just like. You want to get out of that mental zone.
You don't want to live there for forever. Yeah.
Live forever. I mean, you're just poisoning yourself with getting the rush of anger every day. Starting to feed off of anger, feed off of the adrenaline of not negative emotions, but emotions that, if they take over, become a kind of toxin or kind of poison in your body, an
addictive toxin at that too, in some cases.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Thank you for understanding.
Yeah. It's very heavy. It's a heavy record, but I think it accomplishes a lot, and I think it's there's a lot of kind of cool moments. Like I'm thinking into the Damaged Eyes. Damaged Eyes, yada yada yada. That one. I can't remember the title. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like it's like totally stark and crazy.
Yeah, Damaged Eyes squinting into the beautiful overhot sun.
Perfect. Yeah, that's the one. It kind of ends with that.
John wrote that one for the most part.
It's got like that Bach, that kind of like.
The last track at the end.
Yeah, it's so kind of.
I practiced that. I practiced that on my roommate's upright for 3 months, trying to learn how to play that. That also was recorded. I just had the laptop sitting on top of the piano. He had this really. He needed some WD-40 or something. The pedals were really squeaky at that point.
Sure.
And so the recording is like so noisy, but I thought that it was nice. It kind of added to it. I worked so hard to play that. Like that was like my big like piano debut. Playing this Bach piece. But yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
well, I think it's a cool record. I mean, it's.
Thank you. It was not our most enjoyable record to make.
I'm sure not. Yeah.
Because we were apart, and I think there was. I don't want to say that it was inevitable because it wasn't, and I consider it mostly my fault. But there, without a lot of conscious effort to resist it, there can be a dynamic that takes over in a group of people, particularly when they're not face to face, where some people might end up kind of putting in more, or end up controlling more. And I think that record was too heavily weighted on me. I played too many of the instruments, or I wrote too much of the music. I mean, it's still everybody, but I feel like I ended up being more. It's like that one was more me, and I think we all kind of had a little bit of a, I don't know, a feeling of dissatisfaction, not exactly with the music, but with the band morale and the band process.
Interesting. Okay.
We felt like it had broken down or disintegrated it by being apart, and we had to work really hard. The one we just finished, which will be our next one, which will come out this year, I feel so differently about and so good about, because exactly the opposite. Like we confronted this, and my bandmates, confronted me about this power dynamic, or about this sort of unfair distribution of voice, and we worked really hard to be very strict on this one, to make sure that everyone's voice was included in a equal way. I mean, you can't get mathematical about it, but where everyone felt that their contribution was absolutely essential and huge.
Sure.
And that everybody played, like, the guitars are John and Ed, the bass is Satomi, the drums are me. Like, we were really strict about it, and yeah, I mean, it's just like we just finished it. We don't even have a title for it yet. We're still figuring it out. But
that's awesome.
I think this one is something what we felt like we had to do after the Cave Artists, kind of.
Because it's pretty heavy. I mean.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe this one's heavy in a different way. Maybe heavy metal or something. You'll see.
Well, I wanted to ask you about Lovelore too, because I mean, was that like almost a reaction to that?
This in between.
Yeah,
we did do we put up a free album, digital only, in the fall last year, where it's all covers.
Yeah, it's like Gary Newman and like Rainbow Connection and like there's all kinds of stuff on there.
And a lot of avant-garde classical covers. The time period that was covered was the 50s to the 90s. No, the 50s to the 80s. And it was we basically wrote, this gigantic medley of covers. I mean, just fragments of all these different pieces in different styles for a festival, a kind of a new music festival, which was very weird and unexpected, for an indie rock band to be playing. It was like a classical, avant-garde classical festival. Why are we on this? Well, you guys have to do that. Don't go up there and play your regular set. So we spent months writing a piece that we would play once at this festival. I mean, we rehearsed this thing for, you can't imagine. It was like a lot of labor, and talk about a labor of love. I mean, we had so much fun doing it. And actually that was our kind of first collaborative emergence from this sort of cave artists, thing that had a bit of an unhappy whiff to it.
But you had Stockhausen and the Beach Boys sitting next to each other.
Exactly.
That was awesome.
we were all contributing, suggesting, well, let's do this one, and let's try to learn a Derek Bailey improvisation note for note and treat it as though we're a composition and play it, and then do it with the Jetsons. And it was all this music that was about the space age and about progress and about how the future was going to be something so great. All these promises of that era of capitalism and exploration and manufacturing and we were solving society's problems, and hunger was going to be eradicated, and poverty and disease, and and technology was going to come to our aid, and we were going to be living in bubbles, floating above the earth, and space stations, whatever. Kind of the Star Trek dream, and so for this festival, we had done so much work to do this piece, and we're literally a few days out from the final show, just rehearsing every day at some rented practice space in New York. The festival's in New York, and at some point we're guys, are we really just going to do this once and then throw it in the dumpster? I mean,
it's a lot of work,
and find a place where we could record this. We had one day off between the festival show that night. We had one day off, and then the next day we flew to Europe for a long tour. So that was going to be our one rest day. And so we're John, can you book us and John had a friend who had a tiny recording studio that happened to have an open day that day, the Rivington Studios in Manhattan. And so we went in there the next day, and we were so tired from all the rehearsal. Ed came in like a zombie, after the previous night's show, with the worst migraine he's ever had in his life. Sat right in front of the drums, totally bashing away. And he's got this horrible migraine. Recorded all of it, and then we went on tour, and we didn't have the files, for months, and we kind of forgot about it. And then suddenly John received the files one day, and we were so excited when we heard it again. And then we spent a long time mixing it, but we realized we couldn't do it as a real release on a record or anything, because the copyright thing would be a nightmare. So we said, okay, we just put it up free, digital only, And so we were really, really. That one was so fun,
Well, the way it all fit together.
And I think that made us feel together again, and it was time to, to be a band again, and that's what set us in the right direction. Another thing about that one was that it was all live. It was 100% live.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean,
even most of the vocals were done live, which was hard to mix because it was nothing but cymbals in the vocal mic. But totally live, no overdubs on that record. So I think that made us say, we really want to do that again. For the next one. And although we did not meet at all, and I have not seen them, that's what we're simulating on this upcoming record. Is the sound of the four of us playing together. Yeah.
Well, and that's the only other record I can think of that's even remotely like it is I don't know if you're a Residents fan at all, but the Third Reich and Roll, where they had the
yeah, God, it's been so long I don't even remember what it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean it's just and not even exactly, but just in the way of putting things together that you wouldn't imagine would be together. And
Yeah, totally. Like a mashup.
Yeah, exactly.
medley.
Exactly. It's like it's like a mashup before there were mashups. Totally.
Exactly.
Which I think is a fantastic record, but it's like a heady listen. It's kind of because it's sort of, you know, and I adore the Residents, and I say that with all, you know, peace and love in my heart. But it is kind of like the one, you know, Love Lords. It's pretty joyous sounding, even the more kind of like non-joyous sounding music, maybe. You know,
right. Yeah.
It's and
I
like.
mean, it was really fun to play.
It was really interesting. It was such a nice surprise. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like I would not have expected that, and especially because it kind of seemed to come at a time that you needed a nice surprise in life, maybe.
Totally. Thank you.
So
yeah.
I didn't want to. Yeah. I didn't want to not talk about that. I wanted to.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing it up. I mean, thank you for everything. I can't believe your patience. You know. I mean,
this is great.
This is, if you add it together, it's like 6 hours. You know, of like you know, just nonsense.
Well,
storytelling.
No, it's not nonsense at all. I mean, like it's for some bands this doesn't work.
I appreciate your interest.
But I
thank
think
you so much. Yeah.
You guys are so thoughtful and have done so much stuff that there's so much good feedback off the last episode. And, you know,
well, you realize, of course, it's not going to be fair unless you now go through and do the same 3-episode series with Satomi and then with John,
right?
And then
sure,
you know, one with Rob, one with Chris, and one with Ed.
Let's.
I mean, it's just not going to be fair unless you do that. So.
We're not. No.
I look forward to listening to those.
I was going to say, like, touring's probably not going to be happening anytime soon, so I got the time.
Yeah, we got lots of time on our hands to reminisce. I got to go eat dinner.
Yeah. I was just going to say, Greg, thank you so much, man. This has been a blast.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it, Conan. It's great to chat. And I look forward to hearing it.
Yeah, and let's let's. I'm excited to hear what you guys do next. You know, like this is
right on.
It's a good time. It's a good time.
Okay, we'll have episode 4 when the time comes.
Absolutely, anytime. Open your mind, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, my brother. Take
All right,
care.
Good luck. Stay safe, and talk to you soon. All right, bye.
Take care. There he goes, Mr. Greg Saunier. What a cool guy. That guy's awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Oh, let's listen to some Deerhoof.
When you say it's all over, when you say it's all over, hell yeah, hell yeah, hell yeah, hell yeah.
Plastic Thrills. That's right. That was written for the TV show Vinyl by Martin Scorsese, which would have been pretty freaking awesome and cool. Before that, We Do Parties off of the excellent record. What's the name of that record? Hold on a second. That's Breakup Songs. Yeah. That's and then Breakup Songs before that. Breakup Song is the record. Breakup Songs is the song. That always gets me. Hey, I'd like to thank my guest, Greg Saunier, for coming back in and laying it down. Love hearing about that band. Endlessly creative, always interesting. Hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. It's Tony, John, Ed, Chris, all you guys. More Deerhoof, the better. Name of the show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. Thank you very much for listening to it. The show airs on Radio Nope, usually Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific.
Signing off. Mr. and Mrs. America, all the ships at sea.
ProtonicReversal.com for the archives.
Anyone within the sound of my voice.
Always free, no ads, no sponsors, no kidding. If you want early episodes of the show, early access to episodes of the show,
I've got 50,000 watts of power.
$1 a month, patreon.com/Protonic Reversal will help make that happen, and you help support the show.
Ionize the air.
Sharing the episodes around, reviews, all that stuff, it helps people find it. So thank you for those that are doing that, and it's always appreciated. Thanks for listening.
This microphone turns sound into electricity.
And as always, stay safe out there.
Can you hear me now?
And take it easy.
Out on Route 128, you're dark and lonely. I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on Earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe and really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio